All right, here we are, API storytelling on a Friday. Let me bring in my friends. I'm gonna bring in Mike. Hey, Mike, how's it
Hey, how you
going?
doing?
I'm doing
Hanging
all
in
right.
there.
Survived the week.
Survived the week, barely, but I'm glad I made it to Friday.
All right, let's get Aiden in here as well. See what he's up to.
Hey guys, how you doing?
Hey,
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 there
I'm
he is.
good. We did it.
It's
So we got. Well, go ahead. Sorry.
it's the best way to end the week, like we talked about. This is gonna be fun.
Yeah, well, we have a little bit better production quality this week. I did do some investment this week after last week's craziness. So hopefully we're gonna be a little more streamlined and a little more higher quality now.
It's great. It looks great. I'm excited about the new interface. So let's have some fun.
Cool. So what's on your guys' mind today? What are you guys thinking about this week as we go into the weekend? Any ideas?
Yeah, so I actually had a question for you, Ken. I've been thinking a lot about some of these open standards, and I know you've been doing a lot of work there. And it just kind of occurred to me that like we talked about like Web 1.0 and like API 1.0, which is like public APIs. Now there's all these internal APIs and partner APIs, and like I'm wondering if open standards is like going to be a big part of like the future and kind of what your thoughts are about it. I think you've spent a lot of time in it, so I was curious if you could talk about it a bit.
Yeah, definitely relevant to what I'm working on right now. So I think I know Mike especially has always been a big proponent of standards and usage of common patterns. And it all makes sense over the last, decade, I would say, like to do APIs in this way. But I would say everyone's still kind of their special little snowflake when it comes to APIs. There is no common social API. There is no common image or video API. You have Facebook, you have Twitter, you have YouTube, you have these walled garden kind of proprietary special snowflake APIs for these areas. And in the last, I would say 4 or 5 years, I would say the tip of what I've started seeing things shifting slowly was banking APIs, financial. So it feels like I can't tell if it's that they have the most money to invest in the future or if it's the most heavily regulated. I think it's a mix of both. And so government is having playing a role in kind of pushing it forward, but financial and banking APIs having common patterns are just the tip of the iceberg. There's healthcare, the travel, airlines, hotel industry right now is really trying to reinvent themselves around common API standards. And so there's a lot of other industries, but I would say banking specifically in the UK and in Europe, not really in the US, has a common standard called PSD2, and in the US we have one called the FHIR specification, which is Fast Healthcare Interoperability Resources, or FHIR, and it is meant to define common healthcare, digital health, electronic healthcare record interfaces. And so both of those are mandated by governments. The banking one in the UK and Europe is by the governments. And then here, the Health and Human Services and Center for Medicaid and Medicare is mandating the healthcare one here.
Yeah, as I listen to the whole story you're telling, it does remind me that we've been talking about this notion of interoperability for a while. I've been tending to try to get people to think of it as other people's APIs. You're using someone else's APIs. What do you want them to be doing? Rather than what you should do, how your API should behave. I was just doing some research and writing this week, and really, when you think about it, when you're not in control of the provider data model, when you're not in control of the provider's API, yet you depend on that API for your job, like for your company or for your service, now interoperability becomes really important. Standardization becomes really important because you're the consumer, right? So I think more and more of us are becoming API consumers, and I think that's what's driving whatever standardization or normalization or whatever that is. is really going to be happening. So I think it's being a consumer that is the big change over the last few years.
Which are you, Aiden? Are you a API provider or are you an API consumer?
I mean, I think we're all a little bit of both, aren't we?
Ideally.
Yeah.
As Mike was talking, I'm pointing up. I don't know where I'll actually be on the stream, but I was thinking, the one that I studied economics, so I think about a lot of the world through that mindset. And S3 interface. There's now how many different tools that use S3's object store, object put interface. And the reason why you do that is because you want to be able to basically make yourself that interoperable piece so you can pull some of that business away. And that's like great when you're doing a standard utility, like shipping API, same kind of thing. Like you send a package this way, now you send me the same data, I'll send that package for you too. Like, so there's some interesting like economics there where it's like least common denominator kind of wins. But then the other example you were talking about, Kim, like how this hasn't happened for Facebook or social yet. It's almost because like what they have behind the API is like proprietary. So they don't actually want to make that easy to share and for other people to consume because that's like their thing. And we can argue about whether that's right or not. But it's just fascinating how like there are some industries where it makes a lot of sense and everyone has an incentive to standardize, and other ones where like there's this complete opposite like disincentive to standardize.
Yeah, I've worked on a lot of efforts to standardize APIs over the years, and one of them was, so this was 2012, I think 13. It was a social aggregate API for social media, and it was called Singly, and it was cool. You had one image API, you had one wall post API, and you could choose, is that post going to go to Facebook? Is it going to go as a tweet? And they would normalize it for you. And this is when I fired up I started API Evangelist, my blog, in 2010 as the business of APIs. Let's make sense of the business of APIs because this is what's going to drive things. And we'll talk about the technology, the tech and the business of APIs. But in 2012, I started talking about the politics of APIs. And this was one of the reasons why is, I won't mention which social media company, but we were aggregating their API and standardizing and using parts of their API, and they were fine with it. And one of our competitors, another social aggregate API, was using their API, and the social provider did not like it and shut them off, and in a not so nice way. And I didn't quite understand because we were doing the same thing. And I realized, oh, we share investors. So, yeah. There's something else going on here. I am able to maintain my API keys, my tokens, and my rate limit at a certain level because I share investors, and it's a very behind the scenes thing. And coincidentally, this is when the Oracle v. Google copyright case emerged, and there's a lot of proprietary, to use your words, Aiden, there's a lot of proprietary thinking about these APIs are our secret sauce. The design and the ordering and the naming of these APIs, that's us. That's our very much. And even though we're putting it out publicly and we're saying bake this into your applications, people are still very much, it's ours though, and we get to say what you get to do with it or you don't get to do with it.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Mike.
Well, I was just going to say this sort of leads into that whole spot about what are standards and what are you standardizing, and are you standardizing the interface, are you standardizing the behavior, are you standardizing the names? There's all sorts of stuff going on around this stuff. When Leonard Richardson and I were writing about this back, and it was around the same time, it was about 2015, 2013, something like that. We were talking about these different kinds of things that people call standards. We said fiat standards. They're the ones that are just behaviors. This is the way we do it, and everybody else should do it like that too. There's no real standard here. We just did it, and everybody gets on board. In a lot of ways, that's what S3 is, right? S3 is this turns out to be the first, or this turns out to be the biggest bear in the room, and everybody just does it. There's also personal standards, like I just like, a certain way of doing things. So I've invented my own documents, my own objects. And then if you use my project on GitHub, you're using my personal point of view. You're using my opinionated way of doing things. If it grows big enough, suddenly you have you've got things like NPM and all these other things where people just started out just building. That's kind of really how open auth really started. Really, it was just like trying to solve one particular problem. But then you got corporate standards. Facebook does it this way, Google does it this way, Microsoft does it this way, and then we all adopt that way because we all want to be, like you say, we all want to be part of that. And then there's the real open standards where Google and Microsoft and all these other companies in some way kind of subserviate their own, that's a word, I don't know what you say, sublimate their own points of view so that there's a sort of a wide ranging standard so that it goes beyond a particular product or beyond a particular brand. Those are the hardest to deal with. Those turn out to be the most economically, in my opinion, the most economically empowering, because that means that I don't need to go sign up for Facebook. I don't need to get permissions from this. Somebody can't just yank it out from under me. I can build it in an open way from the very beginning. And I think we're going through that cycle over and over. I made it up. It's personal. I now work for a large company. Now it's part of an open set of standards. And I think when we say standards, people are on various parts of that ladder or that circle as we talk about them.
Yeah, I'm almost curious, like what are the advantages to the companies using like open banking or open healthcare standards for their APIs? So like the existing players to the consumer, and then also like to a new entrant. Like if I was trying to start a bank or a healthcare company, like how does there being an open standard help me or make things harder for me? I'd be curious, like how you guys see it for those like three constituencies.
Well, let's. Go ahead, Mike.
No, you're the one who's done more of this than anybody else, Ken. I was just going to say that.
Well, let me share my screen and actually kind of.
All right. Okay.
Session, first one.
Actually, show you guys this. Show you how it works. Okay, so I'm sharing this screen. This is the part I'm not so good at production-wise. Are you guys seeing a postman?
No.
No, not yet.
Okay, let me.
Oh,
wormhole. Are you seeing postman now?
Yes.
And now, yeah.
Yes.
Okay, yeah, I almost created a wormhole there and totally killed the universe. That was so close. That was so close. Right, so close to destruction.
Absolutely.
So this is a public workspace for the UK public banking APIs. So this is a offshoot of the PSD2 in Europe. I don't fully know all the legal details now that we've done Brexit, but I don't think it's officially PSD2. But PSD2 came out of the European Commission saying, "Hey, you've got to do these common APIs, and here are these API standards." And I'll zoom in a bit to make it a little more viewable here. And the UK is adopting it. From what I can tell, I can't totally vouch for this. I need to check up on the European side, but the UK is further along in this. And here they have 6 APIs. And what I mean by APIs is I have an ATM locator, a branch locator, a business accounts, commercial credit cards, loans, and personal accounts. 6 separate APIs, each defined as an open API definition, saying you have a path for ATMs, and here's your parameters, your headers, what your response will look like, using e-tags, all your headers, everything that's going to come back, your different errors that could happen, and then all the way down you get what the payload response is going to be for that using JSON schema. And it's actually inline as part of it here. So this open API is dictated by the UK government, and they dictated 6 of them. And then now, what's that?
This is in like a bill. Like there is a piece of legislation with an open API file in it.
Is that right? There's an open API specification document in the legal bill.
I don't know. I'd have to verify that it's in the legal bill, but it does reference this design. You have to follow this design pattern.
Okay.
and
Yeah, okay.
follow it. Whether it says this open API is another thing. That's
Yeah, I get it. But what to follow up on what Aiden's saying is, somebody who's passing legislation is saying you have to use this open banking definition system as well, right? That's really what it's about, right?
yes.
Yeah.
And so they set up this public-private partnership. This is it's not the government running this organization. It's an independent group, but they are appointed and anointed by the government to manage this and move. They have three key buckets. They do the spec, and they move forward the spec, and they move forward in their developer zone these 6, or there's more of them, but these open APIs. 2, they standardize the API management layer. And then part of that is having a directory of all of the actors. So when anybody signs up for a key, you're in this directory, and there's transparency on who has keys and to what level. And then 3, they do arbitration, and they settle disputes, and that's their role as an entity. And why does this matter? Is because you have these 6 standard APIs. These are all public and don't have authentication. There's another workspace, another set of them that are for the private APIs that are behind applications. But these are public, no auth needed. And when you look at them, and I have it set up here as environments. I have an environment for each of the, I think it's like 20 or so banks here. So you have Adams Bank, Bank of Ireland, Barclays. And then all I can do is when I want to use, so I'm now switching to a collection. So I generated these 6 collections from the open API, giving me an individual request that I can make here against this ATM API that comes from that open API. But I can choose from any of these environments. So if I want to look for ATMs, go ahead. What's that?
No, I was going to say that's what I was looking for you to do, is actually, so you have set up the environment variables for all of these providers, and you're using the same API definition test, so on and so forth, against each provider.
Yeah. So here's who do I choose? Bank of Ireland. Here's Bank of Ireland's ATM locations right here. Now, if I want to switch, I'm using the same collection, same request. If I want to look for Barclays, I just hit send, and I should get the exact same API. And it's actually in Postman, it's actually validating in real time that it's in sync with the Open API contract. There's actually some issues, but I think it's in the Open API contract, not the instance.
Right.
And so I can do this with branch locators. I can say, okay, where's the branches for Barclays, and it should work across. Now, not all of them have these APIs. There's a couple banks that don't have the commercial credit cards, and so it varies a little bit. But the same set of APIs should work against all 20 of these. And so, why did the government do this? You look at these, and there's a couple big ones here. HSBC, there's some dominant ones here. And what this is meant to do, and back to, I think Aiden said it earlier on, is this levels the playing field here across these, in that the applications and the cost associated with using HSBC's APIs for building an app, the cost of doing so goes down significantly because it's the same. And then to allow, if you're an app, to allow switching of a user from HSBC to maybe a smaller bank is a lot easier because they all have the same APIs and they're interoperable.
So like if I wanted to build a personal finance app that lets me give like a unique look. Like I've always, my personal theory about personal finance apps is that instead of telling you your balance in your account, it should tell you what percentage of like your allowance you've spent. Like that's a much more useful number than trying to do the subtraction yourself. So like I could build a little app like that where it shows you these things. And then you're saying it would basically work across all these banks, and I don't have to invest in figuring out each individual bank's API. Like that's like a valid use case for this thing is me making a cool app that's going to help a lot of people who bank at these places.
Yeah. Now think of the cost of your startup if you wanted to make that work across 20 banks and they all had different APIs versus now.
Yeah, non-start. It's crazy.
Yeah, and here's the thing that I think is going to be our next big challenge. So think about the way, I'll just use banking as an example, and I think it's even a bigger deal for insurance and health. So in banking, to pull my old man rule, right? You know, I had a relationship with my banker. I would talk to her. I got my house, I got my car, I got my cards, I got my small business loan. I had a relationship with that person, right? Now that I have APIs, there are all sorts of, even when I just went in, you know, deposited or took money out or whatever. Now that I have APIs, I don't have a relationship with that bank. My relationship with my bank is pretty tenuous at this point. And in fact, in many ways, the way this API system is going to work, the bank becomes a commodity item to me, right? It kind of doesn't matter which bank I use, which means I think that for banks, I've become a commodity for them. Yeah. Right. So now my relationship is actually with the API, or more specifically, as a consumer, like a regular consumer, my relationship is with Apple. My relationship is with Venmo. My relationship is with Aiden's app. Right. So I think one of the challenges that banks face, and I think it's going to be the same all through insurance, and I've talked on all sorts of levels of insurance, corporate as well as, you know, personal and liability and all that. The big thing you're going to face is they're going to lose relationships. The whole landscape is going to change. These APIs that we've just talked about, these are bolts. These are nuts. These are the 20-centimeter bolt. These are the 10-penny nails. Everybody makes them. Everybody has them. Nobody's different. It doesn't matter. I go to the hardware store and I grab a bank. That's it. So that's a very different landscape. And if that's true, to go like push my point to the hilt, that means that there will be fewer people making nails. Yeah. There will be fewer banks. Yeah. And I think this is a super challenging element. There's a thing in my head that says making everyone do it the exact same way doesn't increase the number of people doing it. It reduces the number of people doing it. It increases the number of people using it, not doing it. And I'd love to hear what you guys think about that.
Well, this is somewhere I thought we might get to and was really curious to hear about, because like I could see this being super democratizing. Like I could see instead, like think about bank websites and their UIs and how bad, like atrociously bad they all are. And like you would want that to be something where there was an area of competition, because that would hopefully help people spend their money better and make wiser decisions. Like that's what that interface should be doing for folks in their ordinary lives. And there's like even a lot of like sort of attempts to sort of make ethical banking. And like, I think this is a really cool part of that and can make the world better. But I almost feel like the total amount of like competition and opportunity, it never decreases, it only moves. So like in this world that you're describing, like I think it moves to the application web UI layer, but then behind the scenes, it's like Vanguard and mutual funds. Like everyone has a mutual fund, but guess what? 98% of it is Vanguard funds, because they've created the cheapest operating model, and they own almost all of the 401k investments in the world. So like, how do you compete with that? Well, maybe there's one bank that's just like this evil corporation that provides the fastest API by 20 milliseconds and just by default wins because they're in the most countries with the most compliance. And does that make the world better? Like, I don't know. It's almost like the more open you make one part, the more it's dynamic and complicated. Whereas Facebook, it's all integrated. Like they've got their front end, they've got their back end, got this API that they sort of give you access to unless you piss them off, and like they can control that system. So I don't know, it's just really interesting. I like your point about it might not be symmetric, where just because one thing is a commodity doesn't mean that I'm now not a commodity. It could hit me as well.
Yeah, and I think it works also in the sense that everyone takes a piece of the pie, right? Mm-hmm. So now what happens is the people who build the great app, who build the app that surpasses my bank's rather crappy app, I'm gonna have to pay them. Somebody's gonna have to pay them, right? So it's either going to be me or it might be my bank. In other words, I think that you got this notion of there may be a whole new, you talk about where the competition moves to, there may be a whole new competition for delivery mechanisms, right? If you think about it in the simplest terms, you've got infrastructure, you've got middleware, and you've got user experience, right? So you've got infrastructure. Amazon's really good at infrastructure. You've got middleware, Infosys, and several other these banking organizations. They sell packaged banking systems, right? Now, they're not cloud banking for the most part, but some of them are. There's a whole new list of cloud banks that are coming available. Then you've got Apple, and then you've got other people who build front ends, right? So now there's competition at all these different levels. And one of the things that a standardized API can do is move the competition away from how expensive it is to create the API and how you can optimize each one of those experiences. And there's going to be winners and losers in that process, right? There just has to be. And the question is that I kind of put is, at what point does the end consumer become the loser, right? When do we sort of lose out on control? You know what? I didn't realize that 98% of my mutual funds are at Vanguard. I don't like Vanguard because Vanguard dresses in blue. All of a sudden, do I have a choice in the matter anymore, right? Yeah, so I don't know the answer to that one at all.
Well, and there's going to be continually different waves of undertows and currents that we won't be able to see because these large companies are pretty savvy. So open APIs does not necessarily mean equity, doesn't mean access, doesn't mean there's a lot of things, as I've been learning watching these spaces, and I'm seeing this come overseas right now. The Consumer Finance Protection Bureau in the U.S., now that the United States is under new leadership, is pushing forward a set of rules, and I got to figure out how to understand the landscape. But from what I can see is there's a lot of people jockeying for position like the Open Banking UK, or to own the specifications or to be the stewards of the specifications, because how fast or how slow, or in some cases, I was attending an automobile one. I won't name the organization, but they're all on the Open API train, defining a set of standards for the automobile industry that uses Open API specification. And they did a whole series on a webinar series on it, and they were talking and they walked through what Open API does, how it's similar to what I just did. And then they stopped and said, hey, we just want to make sure you all understand that Open API is a specification. It does not mean the design of the API is open. You still have to be a member and pay us to have access to the spec. And I was like, wait, what? What? Wait, no.
Yeah, I'm launching a new API spec. It's called Pay As You Go API.
Well, see, we went through that with this is history repeating itself, right? Remember, what is it, Carl Malamud, the guy who's sort of the hero of opening up all these specifications. Remember, way back in the early internet, even before the web, in the internet days, you had to pay the telephone companies and these telco operators to get these huge manuals for how to actually do inter-process messaging between different computer systems. So one of the things Carl did is he actually got up enough money to buy one of these big manuals, and he digitized the manual and put it online on the internet, and pissed off a whole bunch of people because you're supposed to pay thousands of dollars for this. And he said, no, I paid my $1,000. I just put it up there. And they said, well, you got to take it down. He said, well, you don't understand how the internet works. I can't take it down. It's all over.
It's done. Cat's out of the bag.
Cat's out of the bag. So this is going to happen again, right? And this, to me, is what the Netscape or Google or whatever that is, the API story is really about. The Oracle.
Yeah, the Oracle Google one.
The Oracle Google story is about this next level of letting the cat out of the bag, right?
Yeah.
Because if it turns out that everyone gets the same API, then there's a whole lot of losers, and most of the losers are the people who've been at this for 20 years.
Yeah,
the big investment people.
Locking things up. And I mean, the Oracle, and I worked on the Oracle v. Google case. I have for the last 8 years, and it's still ongoing. And I'm on Google's team Google, but boy, I'm not, when it's like picking the two evil, they're just jockeying for position for who dominates this. Oracle has the older perspective of keep the spec locked up, make it copyrightable, so it's our intellectual property, where Google's like, no, keep it open. But Google's pretty good at changing the flow, putting out a free API. Hey, use this. This is great. Like, get it all baked in. Google Maps is a good example of this. Bake it into your app. Oh, and then at a certain point, we're going to start tightening things down and reversing the flow of value inward towards us. And, it's not, that's going to happen over. I'm seeing it back to the banking is I'm seeing these organizations jockeying for a position to be in the position of the financial banking standard for United States. And I'm coming in, going behind, joining the groups and saying, hey, let me put it into a workspace here so we can certify. And they're like, oh, no, you can't take our open API and put it out on the web. No, people have to sign up for that. And this is how we maintain our membership. This is, that's as wide as their imagination goes, is this is how we're going to generate revenue. They can't see any other ways of generating revenue other than locking this up. But I think it's actually more about them wanting to control the spec and how it's used versus just the direct revenue from it.
Yeah, like so one could argue that there's still this huge asymmetry, even if these banking things are open. So let's say there's this imaginary finance app like the Mint of the future, and I want to start Aiden Bank, and I set up an open API spec. I take the open API spec, I implement it. I have my own Aiden Bank behind the scenes. I got a back office where I invest the money and make loans and all this other stuff. And I can offer a 5% better rate on not 5% interest, but 5% better than the next guy. When someone comes into that app for the first time, do they see Aiden Bank, or they still only see the 20 approved members? And like, where does that democratization come in? It's like you almost need this like other channel of the options for all these different providers, because it's almost like here's the interface to get to code, and then all the banks are now like an implementation. So how do we choose which one we want? And how does the consumer get to decide between them and figure out which one has the best sort of meta properties, like the 5-minute, human phone call? Like, I would like to see that on a piece of paper and say, Aiden, guess what? All this is the same. You can move your money from this fund to Mike Bank, because Mike Bank will always answer the phone. Like, I should be able to choose that. And if it's a little more expensive, then that's fine, because I've made the choice. But I think that's like, there's this illusion of freedom that, and also open competition that I don't think is like actually realized today. And I think that's something I would want to see, like, on top of this, is like being able to swap the implementation for the one that is best for me and what I need to do.
Yeah. So, I've thought a lot about that too. And I think the first thing that's in that story that you just told, that the way that you just described that, is I can actually tell the difference. Like, I can actually surface what's different about Aiden Bank from Mike Bank, right? So one of the challenges is this consumer information pattern, right? There's some chart or some graph, and there are lots of ways to do this. Some special interest groups can do this kind of work. I think one of the other things that you talked about, there's a different kind of competition that needs to go on, and that's the competition for the consumer, the competition for my attention, the competition for my money, for my value. Where am I going to place my value? I'm going to trust you to protect. I have a kind of a different version of this open standards thing. I've been asked a couple of times, not often, because usually it doesn't go well, but I've been asked a couple of times to talk about what industries want, if they want to standardize in a vertical, how to go about that standardization. And I tell a very different story. I say, don't standardize on the open API. I say standardize on the description, the concepts, the behavior, the functionality. Let companies choose their own URLs and choose their own ways of doing it, but they have to say, you have to provide an ATM locator that provides these things, asks for this information, and returns this back, and let people figure out their own API designs. I don't think APIs should be bolts. I think they should be products. And if you make everybody sell the same product, all you're doing is you're just optimizing for the materials that you make it with, right? This one's made out of plastic, but it's the same shape as this one that's made out of metal. So I think I don't know that we're ready yet, but I think we need to level up the playing field. we don't fight over HTTP the way we fight over APIs, right? Because HTTP lets you to do things in all sorts of ways, and yet we're still compatible. But right now for APIs, we're doing a very point-to-point, exacting, demanding integration, which I think reduces the ability to be creative, innovative, create a relationship. So I think we have to come. We've got a ways to go in this space. We're making lots of progress, but I think there's a big step to make yet.
Yeah, I actually agree with you on that, but I think for different, I don't know about different reasons, but I feel like, and I always say this about Open API. This is what I used to say to our friend Daryl, that who works on the Open API spec, who hated it back when I first started hanging out with Daryl, and now he's like all team Open API. But Open API for me is not where we want to be. I don't, and I think when we are right now, we're hitting our head on the limits of the HTTP protocol and this homogenized pattern that we've all restish, all of that. And we're kind of hitting our head on the ceilings. And that's why you see GraphQL, you see Kafka, you see, Nats, all these other, and I think dictating the API is definitely limiting in that in a sense of a protocol, in a sense of the big circus tent that is API. And we need to think bigger, and we need to be more interoperable. That'll allow us to be more interoperable. The problem is getting everyone there. And I feel like Open API is like I always see it in my head as that crew that builds the bridges in World War II. Like, when the bridge gets blown out and they've got to like lay the new bridge overnight, that's what I see Open API. It's just this constant patching to get us to the future, and in mass, not just individuals. In mass, it gets us there. And at some point we're going to go, look, let's all just like stop and breathe and build the right infrastructure, and we don't have to keep like rebuilding the bridge every night and then bombing the shit out of ourselves. Excuse me. It's like, but we're here and we're in this, and we're at the front lines of the API war, and it's like, at some point we'll slow our roll a little bit, and I think see it, or maybe not. I don't know.
A doctor friend of mine, I once asked her, what's the hardest part of doing surgery, heart surgeon, and she's like, yeah, the only hard part is that the patient has to survive.
I think
I can switch it hard, but the patient surviving, that's the hard part.
That's right. That's exactly right. I think we're all kind of seeing the same sort of thing, right? We're talking about, where does the innovation move to when we standardize, whatever the standardization is, at whatever level it is, whether it's at the implementation level or the design level. Like, when we standardize, where does the innovation go? It's almost like the law of conservation of innovation, right? It's going to go somewhere. So somebody's going to be creative somewhere. So does it go to the client? Does it accrue to the consumer? Does it accrue to the provider? And what can you do up to sort of keep the playing field level, and yet not devoid of that innovation? One of the observations that I keep mentioning, Leonard Richardson, because Leonard needs to be talking here. Leonard has seen so much over the years. He works in the book digitization space, in electronic books and so on and so forth, for New York Public Library, and he's created a standard for both servers and consumers, for providers and clients, and he manages this standard in a pretty open kind of way. And one of the points he made, which I thought was really interesting, he said, in the library business, it's not a problem that all of us are serving the same customer. We actually want to serve the same customer, because the value exchange is when people use library books. So if we have an opportunity to standardize and do it the same way, that actually levels all of us. That raises the quality of the entire infrastructure. If we can actually instantly, check a book out of the British library from America, or the Swedish library from Australia, that's a good thing, right? But in capitalist or competitive space, it's not a good thing that we put everyone on the same scale, and it's just as easy to buy it from Australia as it is South America or down the street. So there are really competing forces here, and a lot of this opening and democratization makes sense when the general, when the aggregate gets better, because we're democratizing. But there are lots of cases where we operate where the aggregate is not improved, where people make out better if it's broken apart. So that's another big challenge.
Yeah. I think it's not even just like a capitalist thing or not. I think there's different sectors and different like shapes of value chains that like some are convex, some are concave. And it behooves you to share in some circumstances, not in others. Like one could argue that like network effects actually, in my opinion, like decrease competition and are bad for society because they're the intellectual equivalent of rent seeking. So
rent seeking for information. No, rent seeking for information space, right?
Yeah.
Because when you what is the word? I can never think of the word when, you know, I can give you the data and I can give Kin the data, you know, it's
arbitrage. Maybe
it's not fungibility, right? But it's that it's not consumed, right? When I give it away, right?
It's like data is a kind of leverage. Like you can give it to as many people as you can. The marginal
so network effects are a way to get all of us to consume the same data. All of us get value out of the same data, right?
Yeah. So I could in theory take Stripe's beautiful. I'm not going to do this. Don't sue. Their beautiful open API spec. I could implement their entire API with a team of maybe 10 people in a year. And I could charge, I mean, if I got it backed by people, I could charge like, you know, 1% less and then say, hey, Stripe customers, just change your host name and the fees are going to be 1% less. Like that, in theory, that should be something that happens. But and comparatively, if I could get 50% of their business, it'd be worth that initial investment. But like someone could have done that in the last 10 years. There's a lot of smart people in the world. Why haven't they? I think it's sort of like, you know, it seems like that would be like if you pitch that without the word Stripe in it, that sounds like a great business model. There's billions of dollars a month going through this API. I'm going to copy it and then charge slightly less, but make up for it in volume. And they've done all this design work. Like I could do that. And in theory, I'd make money doing it. And I feel like you could pitch that, but like those things don't happen in the real world. I haven't seen many examples of that happening, which I don't think that there's most things happen for a reason. And the fact that something doesn't happen also is a reason too. So I don't know why it hasn't happened more, but like in this world of democratization, like that should be expected. Like we would want that to happen. It would mean there'd be more competition, but this doesn't happen. And I don't know exactly why it doesn't happen in the API space.
Yeah, I think there's so another thing I constantly wonder about is why Amazon hasn't sued all the people copying the S3. You know, why are they incentivized to allow this? Because it's been happening since day one. I still have a screenshot of Google's storage homepage. I don't think Google storage exists anymore, but it's a new thing now. Yeah. But the first day it says this is an AWS 3 compliant API on Google's page. And I've seen that. And then last week I had a call with a company, open source storage, Kubernetes storage, next gen open source. That is, I said, hey, you have a REST API? And they're like, yeah, we have a REST API. I'm like, where's your open API or Postman collection for it? And they said, well, I mean, no, it's Amazon's API. It's the S3 API. So like they hadn't, you know, they're just like, no, we're S3 compliant. It's the way things are. And why doesn't that bother Amazon? I mean, maybe it does. I don't know.
That's a good counterexample to I can't think of any like that fits into the exact bucket that I was trying to get at.
Right. And that's where you start to think about, you know, is the API the product or is the API just the bolts and the nuts and the wood, right? For Amazon, the API is not the revenue source. It's your data that's the revenue source, right? The API is the leverage, right?
Yeah, the fact that I can get that object back out in a millisecond anywhere in the world, that's the value. Yeah.
That's right. That's where the value exchange happens, right? So this kind of, you know, to circle it back around to PSD2 or the UK variant, right? The value exchange is not the API, right? The value exchange is getting your money or moving your money and so on and so forth. So this may go to sort of the thing that Aiden was kind of talking about, like there are lots of different avenues or convex, concave value exchanges where the API is sometimes the product, which I kind of advocate for. But sometimes the API is just the nuts and the bolts and the wood and the nails, right? And when that's the case, you need to make that super, super democratic for everyone. Because as soon as you do, you open up the value chain, right?
Well, and it's like you said, Mike, I mean, in the context of the banking, the value isn't /ATM at HTTP with these headers.
Yeah.
The value is that ATM location, that object, and semantically me knowing that that's an ATM, that it's not some other acronym, ATM acronym, that's not, that's actually semantically where I can go physically and get my money out of my bank account for this bank. And so the value is in the object, the schema, the semantics, and that shared meaning and notion. It's not HTTP, ETAG header, application, JSON, or even, if I went, TCP or, some other mechanism for getting at it. That's what I'm getting at right there. Is that value.
Yep.
It makes me like think about kind of, this is maybe too meta for episode 5, but what is an API? And I feel like there, Mike's definition of the screws versus the product is really interesting to me, because I think API, like I think you could create 2 buckets of APIs. There's APIs that are infrastructure that are like kind of moving like a conveyor belt information around for other things to add value to it. And then there's like the APIs that are kind of like doing a job for me. Like I'm sending something here and I expect a physical letter with this PDF in it to end up at someone's house 2 days later. Like, and I kind of wonder if, as we get further into this, if like there will be more people who are just like infrastructure. Like I could imagine a really cool, like send a letter to a real address company starting that has the API first and doesn't actually do the fulfillment, but will just like round robin it out to people who work underneath it. Just like Amazon has like their fulfillment centers, but they also will like send it out to these other fulfillment centers too that are owned by private individuals. Like that seems like a really cool future for some of this stuff. And I wonder if
that's the value. That's the sort of the value add economic model, right? So the notion that I can add value to this community by being one of those distributors, or I can rethink the way distribution works entirely. There's enough nuts and bolts to like, I pick up the same package everybody else does, but what I do with the package is really unique. I drive all the packages to Covington, Kentucky, and then release them every morning to the rest of the world. Like, that was the whole thing about Federal Express, 40 years ago. It was like, this is a stupid idea, fly everything into one place. Well, now it's the way we do it, right? So I think you're exactly right. Creating an ecosystem where there's enough standardization that you and I can buy the same bolts and nuts and raw materials, but build totally different things out of it, work in the same chain of value. That's where we want to be, right?
Yeah. The real world example of that, I think, is kind of, it's a little contrived, but like Postmates. Like I put in a meal that I want, and then like a real world human who's a contractor delivers it to me. Same with like Uber and some of these other things. Now in the API world, like you would expect that middle part to not just be a person, it could also be a software company or a software process happening. But it's the same kind of thing where it's like a round robin out to someone who can fulfill the job with some level of quality and some rating system to figure out, should we like I was in an Uber car once, and this person would turn off the engine on the highway because it saved gas. And don't worry, he was a taxi cab driver in New York, and he knows how to get the engine to start again when he needs to by popping the clutch. And luckily I got picked up on the side of the road by a different Uber driver after I asked to be let out of that car. But this man had written a book, and it was available on Amazon. So I guess we come full circle. But yeah, like the point is, like, there's all these different agents, and some of them are humans, some of them are machines. And this round robin kind of economic thing is like, could be democratizing. Whereas like obviously things that aren't democratized, like Facebook, they are taking all of the money and holding it in their pot, and anyone who gets too close, they push it. And it's like a very different kind of using the network effect for different reasons.
Yep. And think now, just add to this, think now that selecting agents, that getting in and out of cabs, all of that stuff at the API level, that finding a fulfillment provider happens in real time.
Yeah.
So what I do is I say, all right, I've got a package to deliver to Kin. who is going to be able to convert this into a PDF for me? Oh, I do. I pick you because I've had a good experience with you. So you get this package, you get that package, you get this package. So all of a sudden what we do is the same kind of way we negotiate in physical world for suppliers. We're going to start negotiating in the API world, but you're going to do it in real time. And we have all of the technical bits to do that now. What we don't have is the standardization. It's the only thing missing. We have all of the technical speed and accuracy and variance that we need. We don't have the standardization. And that's an economy. That's an entire live economy. And
you have multiple tiers of it that how much of these things end up happening in one cloud provider in Amazon, bringing it back to Amazon, where they're like, and this is the classic why you want to do an API, because you want to acquire talent, you want to invest in innovation that happens. But then there's also a third route where you can go, well, that's pretty interesting. I see you making all those deliveries and doing it faster and making it optimized. Well, we're just going to go ahead and do that. And we're going to do it at scale. And we can do it in 150 more locations than you can. That's pretty cool. Yep. Thanks for that idea. And so it depends on where you're at in the food chain and whether you're up or above or how much visibility. So there's a lot.
And where you are in the Kiritsu, if you think about it from the sort of the Asian terms, like if you're in a captured chain, right? Your only job is to provide fealty to the rest of the chain. But if you're in that democratized version of it, right, you don't have any automatic fealty. And it's a bit more Darwinian, but that also means it's a bit more, you have a chance that random selection, that random mutation creates a brand new set of features and stuff. So Facebook in a lot of ways is that, vertical, right? Is that captured vertical. And if you want to democratize, there's a chance, there's a targeting for you. Can you create, that kind of personal connection thing in this automatic, real-time, negotiated, democratized, standardized place? We certainly can't do that right now. We don't have those bits, but that would be a hell of a thing.
Yeah, I mean, reading through the FTC's lawsuit against Facebook right now is pretty interesting in that, they point out that Facebook knew that Instagram was a deal, was something they should buy, was a threat because of their API consumption. Instagram used Facebook's API for a significant portion of its operations. Facebook knew that WhatsApp was a threat and that they should acquire them because they use their API and they could depend on them. And then once they acquire them, they can then slow, obfuscate, increase the error rates, do all the other things to all of the number 2, 3, and 4 competitors, and revoke their keys to ensure their place in in owning that whole space. It's fascinating to watch.
Yeah, very, very interesting.
Information hedge fund that Facebook is. It will be described. I think it will be described that way in 40 years. We're still too in it to think of it as to think of anything but a social network, but it is an information hedge fund, and we will call it that in 40 years.
Intellectual rent seeking and information hedge fund are two things that I got out of this call today that I'm going to be thinking about throughout the weekend. That intellectual rent seeking is like
excellent stuff, man. Yeah, that's a mind blower.
Yeah, just keep talking about econ, and I could go for 4 more hours. This is I'm going to do writing blog posts all weekend about this stuff. But yeah, this is how we make the world better. Like, hopefully, people see some of these trends and can see opportunities, and hopefully, this sparks in 3 people some crazy idea to try to make some of this stuff real.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah, when it comes to this standardization, I mean, I think things are going to heat up this decade. I see it in many industries, many spaces. But having learned from the last decade, I don't think we're going to get as far down the road and as fast and as we think we are in the next decade. And I think the big co's, now that they understand APIs, they see APIs, they're going to get innovative and crafty in how they circumvent things. So I just don't believe that open and standards are going to democratize and change everything. we've got a lot of other smaller skirmishes and battles and wars to
Right.
fight, but they're essential and they're important to
Yes.
what's going on.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Well, cool.
Well,
Yeah.
well, I think we've got plans for next week. We're gonna bring in some other folks, right, to continue that. But I think just the three of us, we do a damn good job of just jumping on here and having a good time, if nothing else. So
yeah, I was gonna say I enjoy this. I don't know if anybody else really does, but I enjoy this ability to talk with you guys so much. I really appreciate it. Thanks a lot.
No, thanks for being here, you guys. I really appreciate it. And with that, I'm going to go out with our new little platform here. And thanks, Aiden. I'm going to say goodbye to you first. Appreciate it. Have a good weekend.
See you, Aiden.
Get some rest.
In 5 minutes, talk to a team that's doing a open healthcare standard. So I'll be well read into this now. So thank you.
Okay.
Let me know how it goes. Bye.
All right. See ya. Look at that. Yeah.
And I appreciate your time, Mike. Always, I'm stoked that we, in this COVID time, we get to see each other's face so often. So this is cool.
Yep. You take care of yourself, and we'll see each other pretty soon someday, I bet.
Alrighty.
In real life.
Have a good one, Mike.
You too. Bye-bye. Bye.